cold, brisk morning of December 1st, 1937, hundreds of thousands of people awoke to Japanese imperial soldiers marching into their city of Nanjing. Waking to see this sight, many tried to flee, only to realize it was simply too late. The Japanese soldiers quickly cut off the exits to the city, completely surrounding it. The Japanese had begun to loot the city, rummaging through the rubble of destroyed shops and homes, taking anything they pleased. While some looted, others began the massacre, killing Chinese soldiers indiscriminately. Any man suspected of being a soldier was rounded up and killed. This was the start of the massacre of Nanjing, a massacre that wiped out nearly 300,000 Chinese men, women, and children.
The invasion started in Shanghai. The Japanese forces took the city and forced the government to relocate, and they moved up the river to Nanjing. The Japanese soldiers destroyed the city and looted it as they went. This continued for the coming weeks, and the Japanese slowly moved up the river, taking city after city. Eventually, fearing the worst, the government pulled out of Nanjing, moving much farther inland. The citizens of the city were warned to leave because the impact of the city falling was unknown. Some listened, but many more did not and stayed in the city. Days before the start of the invasion, there was no general authority in the city. Soldiers began to desert their posts. Unit leaders abandoned their men in favor of running and surviving. These lone soldiers were left with a choice of fighting a strong invading army or fleeing and surviving. Many left their weapons and uniforms, taking clothes from citizens of the city to blend in. This, however, did not help.
Although having a strong army, Japan was vastly outnumbered in terms of troops compared to China's army. Despite this, Japan was able to take advantage of China's untrained soldiers and was able to win many battles against them. Japan had by now developed a strict militaristic culture. From a young age, discipline and obedience were pounded into children's minds throughout school and home life. When young men joined the military, these rules became even more strict. This, combined with Japan's culture of honor and discipline, led Japan to quickly become a strong military nation. China, on the other hand, had largely been ruled by dynasties. These dynasties typically had no armies, and their fighting power was made up of different scattered ethnic groups. When the last dynasty fell, there was a power vacuum. The nationalist government took over, but faced heavy opposition from the Communist Party. This led to long-lasting civil wars between the two sides. Japan, seeing this Western communist influence and the battle for control, further led their imperialistic visions. They decided to invade, and the opposing Chinese parties joined together to fight off the invading Japanese army.
It was complete chaos once the city fell. The Japanese surrounded the city, bombarding the walls from all directions. Once they broke in, their rampage really started. They went through the city, combing the destroyed buildings for survivors and loot to steal. They went through numerous shops and homes, taking whatever they pleased. While some soldiers looted, others went around trying to find and capture all the Chinese soldiers that remained in the city. Fearing that the soldiers would revolt against the Japanese after their defeat, the Japanese forces were ordered to kill all of the soldiers. So they did, in many ways. Soldiers and men suspected of being soldiers in any way would be rounded up and killed. Usually, this happened in firing squad style executions. They were ordered not to refer to the men as POWs because that would mean that they had rights and that they would need to be upheld. And it wasn't just soldiers. Citizens were being killed in the thousands as well. Many tried to escape the morning the city fell, but in most cases, Japanese soldiers in the city limits would kill men, women, and any children trying to escape. Many women were captured and put in some small setup camps. These women were kept to be used by the Japanese in any way that they wanted, most commonly to rape and mutilate them. Fathers, brothers, and sons were killed trying to defend their wives and children.
The Japanese were ruthless in their pursuits. Their war crimes were bountiful from the start of the invasion. It's estimated that over 200,000 unarmed and innocent people were killed during the Nanjing massacre, and between 20 and 80,000 women were raped.
A brutal, unforgiving course of events raises this question: how are ethnic or racial minorities oppressed during times of war?
The Nanjing massacre was ordered by Matsui Iwane, the commanding general of the Japanese Central China Front Army. Because the Japanese soldiers in this army were so disciplined, they carried out Matsui's orders, resulting in mass executions and tens of thousands of rapes. The army looted and burned more than a third of the buildings in the city. Years of propaganda and Chinese and Japanese disputes led to this moment. And the Chinese, being the ethnic minority, they were unsurprisingly oppressed due to the Japanese believing that they were above them. They saw anyone who sided with the Chinese, or anyone who wanted to defend Southern Asia, as dirt and had no problem raping and murdering them. They have shown to us what enough power, discipline, and hatred can do to a group of people. The Japanese soldiers undoubtedly have parallels to the atrocities committed by German soldiers in World War II. Minorities are oppressed in every way possible, since they are seen as dirt and subhuman trash. People in power care little about how they feel. They feel safe and secure with oppression, execution of soldiers, innocent citizens, the raping of women and children, and keeping POWs are ways that minorities can be oppressed. And this is how the Japanese oppressed the Chinese during World War II.
It was really one of the worst tragedies of the 20th century. Entire families were ended by the bloodthirsty Japanese soldiers. In fact, 2 Japanese officers even held a competition to see who could kill 100 Chinese men the fastest with a sword. Because they couldn't decide who had won the first time around, they decided to do it again, this time upping the ante to 150 men. Newspapers in Japan even reported on this, praising these 2 officers for their fine work. After the war, the newspapers were buried and hidden.
There were dead people everywhere. All the roads were piled up with dead bodies and covered with blood, says one first-hand account of Zhu Langguo, who was only a little girl when the tragedy took place. To this day, the truth is still hidden from the people. Using the distraction of World War II, Japan obscures the atrocities of Nanjing. Some people's heads were cut off, and some had poles in their heads. There were also people whose legs were shot off, or whose arms were cut. It is even rumored that the Japanese destroyed records and testimonies from their own officers and soldiers, compelled into silence, while Nanjing victims who were ruled by the Japanese were forced to keep their mouths shut. Even as the massacre took place, Japan launched a massive propaganda campaign to silence the reality of the event. While thousands were massacred daily, the Japanese even held tours of Nanjing for its citizens. Corpses from the massacre have been cleared of the streets, which the Japanese typically left to rot. Japanese newspapers reported a peaceful Nanjing, full of grateful and well-treated Chinese citizens, and staging photo ops of the city.
The city was buried in tens of thousands of bodies. They were everywhere you could look. They would get piled up and burned too. The city smelled of burning bodies and rotting corpses, all while people hid in the city still trying to escape or survive. There was blood everywhere too. With all the bodies there, it had to be. Executions happened in the river because there was no cleanup. At times, at certain locations, the river would be red with the blood of all the people killed in it.
There were, however, foreign eyes who witnessed the event, those who remained to protect the Chinese people. Several American journalists were in the city and watched the unfolding horrors. While they left Nanjing before the massacre ended, they were still there to see the invasion and first few days of brutal occupation. Working for major newspaper companies, such as the New York Times, they were able to get the story out onto front pages across the globe. To this day, China and Japan have never fully recovered diplomatic relations from this event and many others between the two. While many Japanese prime ministers and Emperor Akito have publicly apologized for the event, Japan has never given out a written apology. With the rape of its women, the brutal killing of nearly 300,000 innocent civilians, leaving their corpses to rot, destroying records of Japanese officials, and silencing citizens are all forms of oppression of a minority, and it is clear to see why China demands a written apology. However, there is a possibility that China may never get the apology it deserves and leave the city of Nanjing devastated forever.